Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this webinar on exporting and importing. I hope everyone's doing okay and is healthy and safe. Before we get into importing, we will talk about exporting. That's a lot easier than importing, and it's actually quite helpful when you are importing into inFlow, and you'll see why. So when you're exporting from inFlow, there are two main ways you can do this. The first way you can is to export all of your data out of the system at once, and it's all data of the same type. So if you are looking to export all of your products from inFlow, you'll do it this way. Or if you're looking to export all of your sales orders at once, you'll do it this way as well. So this first way, and we'll go over and I'll show you how to do both of these methods in a demo. There's also a second way that you can export data out of inFlow, and it's exporting just a selection of data. So if you wanted a filtered result, you can do that as well. And an example of that would be if you wanted to export all of your fulfilled orders or only your paid orders, for instance, out of the system, you do it the second way. So let's go ahead and change to screen share. So you're going to see a little bit of a mirroring situation going on, but I'm going to quickly get out of that. So you should all be seeing my screen right now. Let me know if you're not, but we're in the inFlow Cloud desktop app. You can export from the desktop app as well as from the web app. So I'll show you both ways. We'll start with the desktop app first. So the first way, if you wanted to export all of your data of one type, that's very straightforward. It's from the main menu. You'll go to General, and then you'll see Export Data. I assume many of you have actually done this before. If not, this is pretty straightforward here. You want to select the type of data that you want to export. So there's these options here. So you can export your customers, your vendors, your product details, stock levels, your sales and purchase orders, your language out of the system as well, and your bill of materials. So we'll start with product details. Once you select your data type, you'll want to select the location on your computer that you'd like to export the file to. So I'm going to export it to my desktop, and we've exported it. So let's have a look to see what that looks like. All right, hopefully you're still seeing my screen here. So you'll see that all of my products from the system have been exported, including all of the data that's available to export. So there's lots of columns here. This includes stuff like your markup, the cost, barcode, and your sales unit of measure. So pretty much all the data that you can export from inFlow to do with your products or your sales orders or your customers or vendors will be exported in this method. It is possible to export from the web app as well. So I'm going to show that real quick. And the process is very similar. You're going to go to the main menu and you'll see an export button there. And again, you're going to select your data type and you'll export it out of the system. If you are looking to export only a selection of data, so that's the second method, that's only available on the desktop app right now. So we're going to switch back to the desktop app, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So let's suppose that I want to export all of my products that are in the treats category. What you'll want to do when you're exporting just a selection of data, and sorry, I should have started with this, you're going to want to go to your list view for that data type. So if it's your purchase orders, for instance, you'll go to your purchase order list. I've only got one here for now. If you wanted to export certain products, you'll go to your product list. So hopefully that's straightforward. And then you're going to want to filter that list however you'd like. So in this case, I'd like to export only my treats. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to filter for just my treats. And here's my filtered list. At this point, you can export this table out of inFlow. And the way that you do this is by right-clicking on any of the column headers. And you're going to see two options at the bottom. So you're going to see export contents to CSV and export these products. The first option here, export contents to CSV, this will export the table as you see it in inFlow. So it's only going to include the columns that are shown right now and no other columns. So we're going to take a look at that so you guys can see an example of that. So I'm going to export that out of the system. And then let's take a look at the second option as well. So the second option here, export these products. This is going to export all of the data that's available to export for these specific 3 products. So it's going to look very similar to a product details export that we just did just before this, except it's going to be filtered for just these 3 products. So we're going to take a look at that as well, just so you guys can get a good understanding of the export process. So let's take a look at our export files. So I just exported 2 files here. Oh, looks like I did not. Let's export these products here to my desktop. Okay. So the first example here, you know what? I think I may have renamed it wrong. Yes. So let's just redo that real quick. So I'm going to export contents to CSV. So this is going to export only our table here. So just to make it super clear, I'm going to rename it. Here we go. All right, table. Here we go. So with this option here, it's only going to export the columns that you see in the table in inFlow. So this could be helpful if you're looking for just a snapshot or you're not looking for all of the details that come with those products. The second option that we did is we exported we exported these products. So that's the second option here, export these products. And here you'll see that it looks very similar to our initial product details export, but it's including all of the details, all of the columns that are available. So those are the 2 different ways that you can export out of inFlow. So you can export all of your products, or you can export a selection of your products. And that goes the same is with the sales orders and purchase orders. So if you wanted to export only a selection of those, you'd go to the list view and you would export the table. And as a pro tip, as you can see here, I'm exporting a table out of inFlow. So maybe some of you know this tip already, but you can actually export most, if not all, product tables out of inFlow. So for example, if you wanted to export your your locations, you can open up your inventory locations and you can export this table just by right-clicking on the header. So any table that you see in inFlow, if you wanted to export it, you probably can. You can just press on the header, right-click on the header, and you should see an option to export it to CSV. So even if you had a stock adjustment and you wanted to export that out of inFlow, you have that option. So keep that in mind. It could be helpful for you if you wanted to play around with data in a spreadsheet instead of in inFlow. All right. So any questions at this time? So any questions to do with exporting? Looks like no questions so far. We're going to go ahead and switch back to our slides here. Okay. All right, so now we're going to go into importing. So this is probably what you're here for. This is a little bit more involved than exporting out of inFlow. There's a few things to note with importing. You can't import all of your data in a single file, so you need to break it up. And I've listed the different imports that you can do in inFlow in this slide here. And this is listed in the recommended import order. So if you're importing or if you're starting inFlow from a blank database, we recommend this, this import order. Of course, depending on your situation, you might need to change it up, but this is the recommended order. And we're going to go through most of these imports But the important part is you do need to break it up. So your product details, for instance, aren't going to include your stock levels. That's going to be in a separate import. And your stock levels are going to be your stock level import will be the one that includes your locations and your stock quantity. So keep that in mind. If you're ever in doubt, and I'm probably going to repeat this a few times, you can always refer to our support knowledge base for guides on how to import specific data types. We have a guide for every single one of these import data types. So I would highly recommend, even if you have done this before, take a look at our support knowledge base article for that specific data type. You can also export a template or an example template from our website that you can use as a guide when creating your import file. So take a look at that. You do have some resources there. Great. So with importing, there are 4 main steps, and you're going to do this with every type of data import in inFlow. The 4 steps are to obviously create your import file. That's the first thing. Then you're going to upload it into inFlow. And as part of the upload process, there is a data mapping step. We'll go through that. And then finally, the import itself. So very straightforward, just those 4 steps. Hopefully you'll be an expert at this by the end of this webinar. Okay, so again, depending on the type of data that you want to import, you're going to create a import file that's formatted in a way that inFlow can understand. And one more time, if you're ever in doubt, refer to our support knowledge base article for specific steps on that data type. Another pro tip, you can export your current data type. So let's say you'd like to import your product details, but you don't know how to format the import file. One pro tip that you can do is export your current products out of inFlow into a spreadsheet just to see what columns are available to import. So that's just a tip there if you're ever in doubt. Also, check out our knowledge base. We do have a template file for you to use as well. All right. We're going to start with product details for importing. A few things to note about product details and products in general in inFlow. You probably already know this, but the product name is the unique identifier in inFlow, and when you're importing your products, it is a required field. So when you're importing products into inFlow, inFlow is going to look at your import file and check to see if the products in your import file already exist in inFlow. If the item already exists, inFlow is going to update that product for you with the data that's in your import file. But if it doesn't find the product, it's going to create a brand new product record for you with the information that's in your import file. So the takeaway here is that you can use a product details import to not only import new products into the system, but you can also use it to update existing products. Another thing to keep in mind is that your item type is a permanent choice. So as you know, there are 4 item types. It's stocked, non-stocked, service, and serialized product. So once you choose an item type, you can't change it. So keep that in mind. If you don't specify the item type in your product details import file, inFlow is going to, by default, set it to stocked. So keep that in mind. And we're going to take a look now and create an import file together. So I'm going to switch over to our screen sharing one more time. All right. Okay, so as I mentioned, the only required field that you need for a product details import file is the product name. But of course, that's not going to be useful. So we're going to add some other some other columns that we can import in. Item type, as I mentioned, isn't a required field, but it is a permanent choice. So we'll want to specify it here. Let's do the unit price and also the cost. we'll do those four files, those four columns. You can import many other columns. And if you're ever in doubt again, we can take a look at our product details export file that we did. And there's all these available columns that we can actually import in, but we're not going to do that. We're going to keep it simple for now and just import these four columns. And I know we had a question about cost. Let me just take a quick detour here and have a look. Or, one moment there. Okay, so we'll actually continue here. So I'll start putting in some example data. So let's say I've got some sunglasses that I'd like to sell or stock. So Aria Shades will do the item type. In this case, you have three options. So it's stockable, stockable, non-stockable, or service. If you are keeping track of serialized products, by default, serialized products are stockable because you are keeping track of their stock. So in this case, the keyword that you're going to be using for the item type is stockable or non-stockable. Or if it's a service item, you're going to put in service. So say my unit price, $100, but my cost is actually 10. And Stu Cruise aviators. So they're also stockable. And we're going to do 50, and the cost is 12. So I'm making a killing off of these. And so once you've got your products in your spreadsheet, you're going to save it as a CSV file. So this is a very important step. inFlow will not recognize any other file type, so you'll want to save it as a CSV file. If you just click save, I think the default for Excel is an XLS file or a TXT file. So you'll definitely want to save it as a CSV file by clicking Save As. And then you'll have the chance to specify the file type. So in this case, we want it CSV, so comma delimited. And I'm going to bring in product import. Okay, so we've got our very basic product import file. Now we're going to import it into inFlow. There are two ways to do this. You can do it from the inFlow Cloud desktop app, and you can also do it from the web app. The steps are very similar. So we'll go over both of them. I am going to just send you another poll just to see what app you use most. So let me get that going for you. And in the meantime, I'm going to look at any questions here. So I've just sent out a poll. So go ahead and vote there. All right, so let's take a look at the poll. So it looks like most people are using desktop. Some people are using both apps, so that's great. So I'll show you both either way. They both help with the import process. Michael, I know you asked a question here about exporting your costs, your replacement costs. I'm not sure if you're keeping this. If it is just your costs in inFlow, you can export those out. And that's going to be done with a product details export. So I'll actually show you what column that is when you are exporting it. So I'm just going to start our screen share one more time. I have our inFlow product details export file. So your costs is going, it's by default going to be the M column, but you'll see it with the cost header there. So it does export your costs. It exports all the data that you have in your product record. So it'll export all of this here. So including your costs. If you have any custom fields, I'm not sure if that's maybe where you're keeping your replacement costs, because it doesn't sound like a default field in inFlow, it will also export your custom fields. I believe it'll export it somewhere towards the end. There'll be an extra column for your custom fields if you have any. I hope that helps answer the question, but let me know if there's anything else I can share there. Okay. So it does look like most people are using the desktop. So let's go into the desktop right now and do our import. So your import for the desktop app is going to be just in the main menu again. So general, and then import data. And then you'll see this pop up again. You're going to select your data types. You're going to be telling inFlow which data type you are importing. So in this case, we're going to be importing our product details. And you're going to select your import file. All right, so product import, there we go. And then you're going to click next. And just a quick comment about the delimiter here. The most North American systems, operating systems, they use a comma delimiter. Some European systems will use a semicolon instead. You'll notice if you have any trouble with importing your data in the next screen. So if you're on a European system and it's set to comma, you might see some trouble. You might have some trouble with the data mapping. So you'll know immediately if you need to go back and change this delimiter type. I believe inFlow tries to auto detect it. So hopefully you don't actually have this trouble, but something to keep in mind. And I did mention that it's very important to save your import file as a CSV file. And the reason for that is inFlow will only recognize CSV file types. So you won't even see any other file types other than CSV. You won't be able to pick for any other file types other than CSV. So that should give you an indication of the type of data file that you need to save. So keep that in mind. Once you've uploaded or selected your import file, you're going to click next. And this is the data mapping step. So this is probably what looks the most confusing, but it's pretty straightforward. What you'll see on the left-hand side here, this is the inFlow fields that you can see in the program. So item name code, item name code. On the right side, you're going to select this is actually your import file column headers. So in this step, you're telling inFlow which column in your import file it needs to pull data into the corresponding field. So for instance, our item name code, I want to data map that to my name column in my import file. So I'm telling inFlow to pull the data from the name column in my import file into the item name code field. So it's going to get pulled into this field here. And you'll want to do that for all of your columns in your import file, or only the columns that you'd like to import in your import file. So we only have 4 columns, and inFlow will try to automatically match the columns to the correct inFlow field. It is important to still go through them just to make sure that it is mapped to the correct field. Excuse me. Because if you can imagine, if the item name code was mapped to cost, your costs would go into the item name code field in inFlow, and you'd be very confused. So make sure to double check this mapping, even if it is automatic. So we only have 4 columns here. So for us, it's a little bit easier. Item type is mapped to type, perfect. Default unit price is mapped to unit price, and cost is mapped to cost. So I think we're good here. Once you're done with the data mapping step, you can import your products. And so you're going to get a success or a confirmation message here that it's been imported. So we can take a look at that. And let's see. Oop. So it looks like I misspelled it there, but Cruise Aviatora, apparently. So it did get imported here. So that's kind of the gist of the import process from the desktop app. But if we switch over to the web app real quick, you're going to see that it's very similar. So It's going to be in the main menu, import. You're going to select your product details, or sorry, your data type. So in this case, it'll be product details. You'll select your file, and you'll be greeted with another data mapping screen. So this is very, very similar. All right. So any questions so far? All right, looks like we don't have any questions here for now. Let me get back to our slides. Okay. So if you do have any questions, just pop them in there, and then we'll be happy to answer those. Okay, so hopefully you're seeing my slide now. So we did talk about a product details import file. So there's many columns that you can actually import, but again, the only required one is the name field. If you are tracking serials, so I did briefly touch on this, your item type will be set to stockable, but the way that you tell inFlow that you are importing a serialized product is by including another or an additional column called track serials. And in this case, you're going to mark any item that is serialized with true and any non-serialized products with false. And then there are some additional columns that you can include that are serial specific. So serial prefix, serial next number, and serial suffix. So if you are ever in doubt when you are importing serialized products, check out our support knowledge base. It will go through those steps there. And I do see a question from Cal. So can you bulk import product images? Unfortunately, not in inFlow Cloud. You can't import bulk images. It's been a requested feature before, so we'll make sure to note that down and upvote that feature, but not at the moment. If you are using inFlow on-premise, it is localized, so it's a lot easier to import large files. So importing product images is possible with a product details import, but not in inFlow Cloud, so sorry about that. All right. So let's do we already did that. Sorry, importing. Okay. So we went over the two importing processes in the desktop and in the web app. Hopefully doing a product details import has been helpful. We are going to go over the other types of data types that you can import into inFlow, but the steps are going to be the same. So it's going to be those 4 steps. You're going to create your import file. You're going to upload it to inFlow, data map those fields, and then import it into the program. So another thing that a lot of people ask us about is how to import your stock levels. So before you import your stock levels, we recommend having your products already set up in inFlow. That way, all of your product details are already there in the program. Because in a stock levels import, there are only 5 columns that can be imported into the program. So you can only import your item name, your location, your sublocation if you're using those, serials if you're using those, and your product quantities. So there's only those 5 columns that can be imported in. The required columns that you need in a stock levels import are item name, location, and quantity. So those are the only required fields. But as you can see, you're not importing your product description or your product category, nothing to do with product details, only to do with your stock levels and where those stock levels are located in your inventory. So all of your location information. So it's pretty straightforward. If you are importing a product that is found in multiple locations in your inventory, you're going to create a separate line item or line for each location. So the example there is highlighted in the first or top red rectangle there. You'll see that my item 10012A. It's located in 2 separate locations, and I've listed those locations on 2 separate lines. So the only thing that changes is the location name, as well as the quantity in each location. So that's how you would import a product that's in multiple locations. Similarly, if you've got serial numbers, you are going to import each serial on its separate line. As you know, each serial number is unique, so you're only going to have one of every serial. So it's probably quite straightforward to keep the quantity at 1 for each serial number. And you're just going to repeat that item on every single line for each serial. So that's highlighted in that second red rectangle. If you are using sublocations, so this is something that some users have trouble with when importing their stock levels. If you're using sublocations, you'll want to make sure that your sublocations are turned on in your inFlow settings. Otherwise, you'll have trouble importing your sublocations in. I'll show you quickly where that can be done, but I think that most of you guys have already set this up if you've been using inFlow. Your sublocations will be in your main menu, options, settings, and then you'll see track inventory by, and then you'll want to make sure that your sublocations are turned on in this settings screen. So that's just a common error that some of our users run into, so just to keep in mind. All right, any questions? Let's see. All right, so hopefully Tamim will be able to, or some of our team members will be able to answer those there. Okay, so, from Paul, we have a question about removing inventory from inFlow, so deleting them. Unfortunately, it isn't possible to delete products from inFlow. You can deactivate them, but you can't delete them. The reason for this is that some of these products might be on an old sales order. So if we delete them completely out of the system, we're going to have trouble. So you can deactivate them, and you can actually use a product details import to quickly deactivate multiple products. Since I've got you guys here, I'm going to do a quick demo of how to do that. So in your import file, so in this case, what you might want to do is export your products out of inFlow and then use that resulting file to update the deactivated products. So for example, let's say I wanted to deactivate some of my products right now. I'm going to export my current products out of the system. So I've already got my template here ready to go. At the very end, you'll see a column called is active, and you'll notice that for those that have true, it means that that product is active in the system. So to deactivate a product, you'll just simply change it to false. So pretty straightforward. You'd save this file as a CSV file, and again, you're going to go into the file, save as, and then save it as a CSV file and import it into inFlow so you can quickly deactivate products rather than going in one by one. So that was a great question. And hopefully that helps answer it there. All right. Okay, so now let's move on to importing your sales and purchase orders. So this is a little bit more hands-on than your stock levels import. There's a lot of columns that you can import into inFlow with this. If you're ever in doubt, export your current sales orders or purchase orders out of the system and use that file as a template, or check out our support knowledge base. But the required fields that you need to import your orders into inFlow, there are only 5, so you only need these ones here, and we're going to create our import file together since a lot of people do import their orders into inFlow. The thing to remember here, this probably isn't new, but if you have orders with several items on them, you're going to repeat the order details on every line and update only the item-specific columns. So you're going to repeat each item on a separate line. So I've highlighted that in that red rectangle. So you'll notice that the order number stays the same and all of the order level details, so the vendor, the amount paid, that stays the same. The only thing that changes are the item specific details. So the item name, in this case, it looks like I've added the item description, the item quantity, unit price. So anything to do with the items, you will update it for each specific product on the order. You'll also notice in this screenshot here that all of my products for my purchase order 3 are all grouped together. So they're going sequentially. So I haven't separated my item lines in my purchase order 3. I've kept them all together. And this is another common error that some users run into, is that they have trouble importing their items for a specific order when the items are not kept together. And I'll show you what that looks like with a demo, because it's pretty important here. So I'm going to go back to our screen sharing, and we're going to create a new import file for our orders. Okay, so we know that there's only 5 required fields, so we're going to go with those ones there. So we're going to do order number. We're going to do customer. We're going to import our sales orders this time. We're going to do order date and item name, and then item quantity. Those are our required fields. And that's all you need to import into inFlow your sales orders. Of course, this might not be helpful if you need other information. So let's start here. We'll do sales order 1, and our customer is Fred. And our order date, our item name, and the item quantity. So you noticed that the unit price, I have not included a column for unit price. If you do that, inFlow, or if you don't include a unit price column, inFlow is going to default to your default pricing scheme for that product that you already have in the system. So if you don't have your product prices in inFlow yet, then that means that it's going to default to $0. So this is why we recommend getting your product details, including pricing, into the system before you do other imports. All right, so let's say we have another order, sales order 2, and we'll have Wilma. And then in our order date, and she also bought shades. And let's say she also bought a case. So this is a second item on the order. I'm creating a separate line item, a line specifically for this item. The order level details are going to stay the same. So the order date is the same, the customer is the same, the order number is the same, but the item level details will be different. So she bought 1 case. And let's say we have another order. And he also bought a case. All right, so as you see here, I have made sure to group all products on a single order together. If I don't do that, we're going to have some trouble. So I'm going to actually do that right now. I'm going to separate them. So I'm going to add another 4th order. And Jane. And she also bought our shades. Make it simple. Or now we'll choose. All right. So that was our first step. We created our import file. The second step, or rather As part of that first step, we're going to save it as a CSV file. So very important. You know what? I'm going to rename it. All right, so one thing to note here is that I have separated my line items for sales order 2 with another order in between, so they're not together. So we'll see what happens when we import that into inFlow. And you'll see that it's not great. So we're going to go ahead and do this from the web app, since we have already done it from the desktop app. So again, that's going to be the main menu, import. And in this case, we are selecting sales orders. And I'm going to look for my sales import file. And then we've got our data mapping step. So another difference when you're importing your orders into inFlow, you're going to have 2 options. You'll see those up top here. So you can import your orders either as open. This means that you're going to have to fulfill them manually in the program later, or you can import them as completed. So as soon as they get imported into inFlow, they'll be imported in as fulfilled. So your inventory will be updated as soon as you import those in. So in this case, we'll import them in as open. And we'll want to map our fields. So I've only got 5 of my columns there. And the nice thing about importing into the web is that it actually happens in the back end. The same thing happens in the desktop app, but in the web, you can actually continue working in inFlow while you are importing in the back end. You'll actually receive an email once your import is finished. So you don't have to wait around like you do in the desktop app. So this is great if you've got larger imports that you'd prefer to just set and forget. So that'll happen in the background. Since my import is really small, it should be finished. So we'll take a look at our sales orders now. So there are my sales orders. They've imported in, but we'll remember that our sales order 2 had 2 items on it. So let's take a look what happened here. So it looks like it only imported that first item, so Aria shades. But if we look at my import file, I have 2 items there for my sales order 2. So the reason it does this is that inFlow will look at your import. It'll read it from top to bottom. And again, it will look for an existing sales order with that sales order number. If it finds it, it will update that order with the data that you have in your import file. So you can update existing sales orders with an import. There are some exceptions here. When you are updating sales orders with an import file, you can only update order level information, so not item information. So you wouldn't be able to add an additional item to an existing sales order with an import. So in this case, what inFlow's doing is that it's reading from the top to bottom. It's finding sales order 2, or rather, it's not finding a sales order 2 in my system yet. It's creating it, and it's updating it with this item information, so the Aria shades, and then it continues down the list of my import. It hits a sales order 4. It creates that in my system. And then the next line is sales order 2 again, but that one already exists. So it's simply updating the existing sales order 2 with only the order level information, not the item name or the item level information. So it's not adding a second item to my order. So that's why it's really important to keep your items together on your import file for the same sales order. So it should have looked like this. And had I imported my file with all of my items together, you would have seen both of my items on that same sales order. So I hope that's clear. So it is important to keep your orders, your items together on a single sales order. All right, any questions? Let me just check here. All right. Okay, great. And I hope this isn't too overwhelming, or if I'm going too fast, also let me know. All right. So just a few other notes about importing your orders into inFlow. As I mentioned, if you don't have an item unit price in your import file, inFlow is going to, by default, set that item price to whatever you already have in the system. So keep that in mind. If you are selling your items at a different price that's already in the system, you'll want to include an item unit price column. And if you are using a different pricing scheme or a different currency on a specific order, you can include another column called pricing scheme and specify the specific scheme pricing scheme that you're using. Another nice thing about order imports is that you can import your quotes. All you need to do is add an additional column called isQuote, and I've highlighted that in a red rectangle there. And all you'd need to do is set the value to true for any order that is a quote and false for any order that is not a quote. So I hope that's pretty straightforward, but let me know if you have any questions there. I do see a question here. Is it possible to set up an automated export of data, such as the product list every Friday? Unfortunately, not at this time. It isn't possible to set up any automated exporting. We are hoping to release an API sometime in the future. This might help with that. So you might be able to create a custom integration or set up some automation out of the program. So look out for that if you are interested. And actually just reach out to us. Let us know. We'll add you to our list. And we'll be able to reach out to you once that goes live. But that is something that will help with the automation. But as it is right now, it isn't possible to make any automated exports or imports into the system. So I hope that helps answer the question there. All right, and before we leave off the order import, if you are selling or purchasing serialized products, you're going to, in this case, add an additional column for your item serials, and you're going to list the item serials that you are selling in that order in a single cell, and you're just going to separate each serial number on its own by carriage return or on its own line within the cell. Again, if you have any trouble or any doubts about importing serial numbers, do look at our support knowledge base for importing orders, and it'll go through that with some great screenshots. So I hope that's clear there. All right. Any questions about importing sales or purchase orders? Hopefully everyone's doing okay. I know this is a bit of a longer webinar. We're almost done. This is the home stretch. So if you have any questions about importing sales or purchase orders, let us know. All right, so importing your customers and vendors, this is pretty straightforward. It's very similar to a product details import. So you're going to have your customer or your vendor name. This is the unique identifier in inFlow. So you can't have more than one customer or vendor with the same name. So you're going to have a column for your name, and that is the only required field that you need in a customer and vendor import. You can include other columns, so contact name, the email, the shipping address. If you're ever in doubt for which fields you can import, again, refer to our sample import file on our support knowledge base, or export your current customers or vendors out of the system and use that export file as your template. I won't demo this. I think it's pretty straightforward, but if you would like me to demo this, just leave a comment in the chats, and then we can try that out. But I think you guys are probably experts at this point. So to the last slide. So there are other imports that you can do, so bill of materials and language imports. They're also very, very straightforward. They're not used as often, so we're not touching on them here. But if you do ever need those steps or a guide, take a look at our support knowledge base. I think I'm a broken record now, but it's a great place to start. And you can always export your data out of inFlow first and use that as a template. And if you're still stuck, the support team is here to help. So please do reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to assist you with that. So that's the end of the webinar. Before we do end today, is there anything else you guys would like for me to demo or show or answer? Please leave a chat, please leave your questions in the chat. And I do think I have one more poll for you before you go. So while I wait on your questions, for those that are still here, I would love to know what you'd like to see next for our webinars. So I'm going to set that up right now. All right, so take a look at that poll there. We are going to continue our webinar series. So this helps us know what you guys are looking to learn more about. So take a minute there or a few seconds to vote. And let me know your any questions that you have remaining about importing or exporting. I hope that was helpful and clear. Okay, so we're getting some different reports as a webinar request. Okay. Yeah, I'm sure reports are probably a little bit confusing or at least hard to get into. There is a learning curve, that's for sure. Got some custom document votes here. We have Dymo. I know that one's pretty popular. We get lots of questions about that in support. All right, so yeah, it looks like reports are still winning, but yeah, if feel free to tell us what you want to see next. If you haven't joined our Facebook group, please do. It's pretty great. We have a few community members there now. It's a great place to ask some workflow related questions, especially since you guys know that inFlow isn't made for a specific industry. So we have users all across different industries. Lots of users are using workarounds for their specific industry. So if you're ever curious to know if there's other community members in your industry and you'd like to maybe touch base or ask for some recommendations on workflow, the Facebook group is a great community to do that. So check us out on Facebook or reach out to us on support if you have any questions. And of course, we're always here to help. Thank you to Meme. She just posted the Facebook community link. So yeah, check it out. Join us there. So it does look like reports are winning. So thank you very much for joining us today. Let us know if you have any final questions. I'll stick around for a couple more minutes. And we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. And stay safe and healthy out there, everyone. And take care. Have a great rest of your week. Hey, Chris, I know that I see your question there. So you're asking if when sublocations are activated, does the product list on the app show the sublocations that can be exported to the CSV file? That's a great question. Our product list won't show any location-specific information. So you'll actually need to go to our current stock screen. So I'll show you that very quickly here since I've got you. So for stock level and location information, you're going to want to go to the current stock screen. That's going to be found in the main menu, inventory, current stock. And here you're going to see your locations for all of your products, including sublocation information if you do have sublocations turned on. If you don't have them turned on, you won't see this column. And you can export that to inFlow. The only thing to keep in mind is that if you don't have products in a specific location or sublocation, it's not going to show up in this list. So what you'll want to do if you're looking to specifically export your sublocations or just get a list of your sublocations, you can do that from your settings. So the main menu options, settings, you'll go to your inventory location, so manage inventory locations, edit sublocations, and then you can export these out of inFlow one by one. That's probably the best way to do it, if not from the current stock screen. There might be some a report that you can run. So inventory by location, for instance, might give you that information as well, and you can save that as a CSV file, so you can work in it with it in Excel. I hope that helps to answer your question there. All right, thanks everyone for joining us today, and we'll see you at the next webinar.